And without further ado, I'd like to bring up our first speaker for the morning, our leader. We had talked about having a clear leadership plan, and that's headed by Dean Sandro Galea. So welcome.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sandro. I have the great privilege of being Dean of the School of Public Health. So welcome, everybody. Really, I just want to say a few words about who we are as a school and why we do what we do. And I'm going to start with a question. So how many of you have heard of Carl Sagan? Raise your hand if you heard of Carl Sagan. Okay, so Carl Sagan was an astronomer who actually became quite famous, got a lot of TV shows. And one of the little known things about Carl Sagan is that he was actually quite involved with the space program. And in 1977, the spacecraft Voyager, people heard of Voyager? It was a spacecraft that NASA put together and sort of went out in space. And the idea was it was going to keep going. It's never going to come back. And that's exactly what's happened. So it's out there somewhere. And Carl Sagan was responsible for creating the content of the Voyager in case it meets aliens and they need to sort of figure out about us. And one of the things that was on there was a CD. Now this is 1977, so it's actually the early days of before CDs became mass market, and before then they went away for streaming. And it was actually a gold-plated CD. You can actually Google this and find a picture of it. Not now. After I finish talking, you can actually Google it. And on that CD are sounds of humans. So the idea was if aliens find it, they will hear sounds of the earth. And on there is a song. And the song that Carl Sagan chose is called Dark Was the Night. And there are no words in Dark Was the Night. It's a blues song, and it was recorded by Willie Johnson. Now, Willie Johnson was a bluesman who was born in Texas at the turn of the 20th century. He was born in Texas. When he was 7, he was blinded in a domestic violence incident when his mother threw lye in his face. So we actually know him as Blind Willie Johnson. So he grew up in Texas. He was poor, black, blind. He learned how to play the guitar, and that's why we remember him. That's hence the story. As you can imagine, learning how to play the blues and busking, which is what he did, is not a very lucrative living. He got married. He was living in a small hut and with his wife, and their house burned down. But they had no money, so they kept living in the shell of their house. When he was early 40s, Blind Willie Johnson got malaria. So now we're dealing with this is like the 1940s in Texas. His wife took him to hospital, and he was turned back from the hospital. He's turned away. Now, it's not clear if he was turned away because he was poor, because he was blind, because he was black. And then he died. So the question, and the reason I'm telling this story is, the question is, well, what killed Blind Willie Johnson? Well, what killed him was malaria, right? Like the physiologic process that killed him was his malaria, that had he had pills for his malaria, or a shot or something, he would have lived. He would have lived that day. But everybody knows that something else was going to get Blind Willie Johnson. If it wasn't malaria that day, it was going to be pneumonia the next day. If it wasn't pneumonia the next day, it was going to be injury the day after. Because what killed Blind Willie Johnson wasn't just malaria. It was malaria, it was homelessness, it was poverty, it was racism, it was domestic violence, and it was poor access to care. All of those forces killed Blind Willie Johnson. Now, I'm telling you this story because that is what public health is about, and that's what we should be doing in public health. We should be interested in the full range of forces that create health in populations. Now, that means malaria. I just want to be clear. Malaria is very much something that we should care about. But so is poverty, and so is homelessness, so is racism, so is access to care. And in many ways, that is what makes what we do so interesting and also so difficult, right? It is a large expanse. And sometimes I get, well, does that mean you're doing everything? Well, no one of us can do everything, but surely all of us together can. And that is how the school was founded. That is very much the DNA of the school. So this school was founded initially by a group of physicians who will emerge from the medical school, as with many schools of public health. essentially nearly, probably every single school of public health emerged this way, who said medicine is just one small part of generating health. And we want to understand the full range of forces that generate health. This is a school that went through its first, it's now in middle age, through its first formative years, really articulating for itself a vision of public health grounded in social justice and grounded in a deep appreciation for us caring about not just malaria, but also homelessness, domestic violence, poverty, and racism. And what's interesting about the school is that in doing that, in articulating that as its core vision from the very beginning, it also had the dual part of its vision of saying it wants to care deeply about teaching and about students, and it wants to care about being part of the world. So fast forward to now. In the past few years, the school has done a strategic thinking exercise, which has come up with a core purpose, which you've seen all around, which is this think, teach, do idea. Think, teach, do for the health of all, and you've seen it around. And that is actually very intentional, because the school sees itself as generating knowledge, teaching that to students, and being a part of the world of action at the local, municipal, state, federal, and global level. And then with intentionality for the health of all, which means that we care as much about creating healthy populations as much as we care about making sure that all populations come along. Now, we don't have the hubris to think that we today, those of us who are in faculty, staff in the school, are going to change the whole world. No, that's why you're here. Our goal is to do our bit and train you to do your bit. And then we hope you'll pay it forward by training people who come after you to do their bit. And that's how we see the school. We do scholarship, we do education, and we do practice. And that's why you're going to be hearing from the associate deans about that. That's the balance we strike. I'm going to tell you one last story, and then I'm going to step aside because the associate deans have the content, and they'll discuss all this with you. 36,000 people die from guns every year in this country. I want to be very clear. I realize this is a controversial issue, and this is not a partisan comment. I am just coming at it from the place of health. It is incontrovertible. 36,000 people die from guns. How many of you saw the Boston Globe on yesterday? Did you see the gun spread in Boston Globe yesterday? So the Boston Globe had an amazing gun spread yesterday, and they did a very simple calculation. They said, what will happen if every state in the union followed Massachusetts' example? Massachusetts has the lowest rate of gun deaths in the country. That would save 27,000 lives a year. And their spread was actually called 27,000 lives. Now, this is an issue from hell. This is knotted up in politics, in ideology. It has been intransigent for decades and decades. So the question we asked ourselves as a school was, what can we do about it? Going back to the think, teach, do, right? Well, what can we do about it? Number one, on the think side, we have faculty who do research on guns. If you look at the Boston Globe spread and you look at the little fine print at the bottom, you'll see that a bunch of their data comes from work that's done at the school that Professor Mike Siegel and his team have done that have created really the best database there is about gun violence and gun injury. So that's our think side. On our teach side, we have courses around firearms, and we have an engagement, a number of events and programming that's on a regular basis so that our student community can engage with learning what they need to learn about guns. In fact, we just had an amazing event which was organized by Dean Harold Cox, who is, I just saw right now, lurking outside the door, where we actually had a panel for students, and then we engaged the students in actually calling their representatives around guns. So it's the teach shifting to the do. And then I just want to tell you one last do story on this. So in November of 2016, the week after the election, we called a meeting of all the schools and programs of public health to say, what should public health do about this issue? Now, when you call a meeting of all the schools and programs of public health, you organize it 6 months in advance. So when we arranged the meeting, we, like everybody else in the planet, thought there was going to be a different president, which would open up opportunity for work on guns. And again, this is a nonpartisan comment. I'm just stating the facts, okay? I mean, does anybody disagree that everybody on the planet thought there's going to be different presidents? No, it's been, the current president himself did not think he's going to be president, so it's fine. I mean, he said as much. So, we arranged the meeting. The meeting happened a week after the election. You have all the decent program directors of public health in this room, right? And they're all here talking about guns. And what do you think was the mood? The mood was, we're never going to achieve anything about this. We had the meeting, and the ethos was, we, as academic public health, have a responsibility to do something, to speak truth about this issue. Had the meeting, a consensus document emerged, which was called the Call to Action. That was published in the American Journal of Public Health. Now, this is in 2016. Since then, we've had tragedy after tragedy on guns, again, which was the same as we had before. But, you know, the tides are shifting. Momentum is shifting. Last week, about 10 days ago, 26 senators sent a letter to the Senate Health Committee saying it is critical that we lift the ban on research on guns so that at least we can inform the public conversation. And that letter, in the second paragraph, it says, because in November of 2016, there was a gathering of the schools and programs of public health, and they came up with a call to action, and their #1 recommendation was that we lift the ban on research. And in the omnibus bill, spending bill that just came through Congress, there is in it language to lift the ban on research. Now, this was not just something we did by ourselves. This is, we are part of an ecology of action on this issue, which I called an issue from hell. And slowly, slowly, the country will actually grapple with this. But I'm bringing this up to give you a sense of the kind of school we are building and the kind of school that you can be part of. It is a school that first and foremost, leads with excellence in research. First and foremost, we're about data. We're about generating data. We are about making sure our students learn the best possible science and the best possible way to act, but making sure that our data and our teaching happen with passion and purpose, and that is part of the world of action. That's think, teach, do for the health of all. My professional life has been in academic public health. I actually think this is an interesting, worthwhile way to spend a life. I think it's a mission-driven life that is, frankly, gets me out of bed in the morning. And one of the joys of that is being around students who are actually beginning their journey. So thank you. Thank you all for being here. Good luck with your next steps. Unfortunately, I can't be with you because I have to go to the president's house for another event, which has nothing to do with any of this. But that's actually part of my professional responsibility. So it is. That's actually where I came from right now. But I told them I'm ducking out for an hour to come here, and then I'm going to go back there. Whatever you choose, whatever you decide to do, good luck on the next steps in your journey. I actually think, I'm sure this is an unnerving time. You're making decisions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, whatever you decide is all going to be fine. Whatever you decide is going to be fine. It's an exciting next phase of your life, and good luck. You can find my email online. I'm very Googleable. If anybody has any questions, feel free to send me an email anytime. I answer all my emails. My emails are mine alone. Thank you for being here. Have a great day.